Thank you very much. I appreciate you being with us today. I have spoken about gratitude as being an important life principle. And when I say gratitude is an important life principle, I mean that it is important for the peace, wholeness, and well-being of individuals, of families, and communities. It must be emphasized that gratitude, as I am understanding it, must be practiced. It is not real, it is not useful until it is practiced. And I hasten to add that by talking about gratitude and its importance, I am not discounting or ignoring the suffering, the pain, the anguish that people go through and is part of life. Today, I want to talk about gratitude specifically in the context of the relationship, by which I mean any relationship, but certainly our most intimate and personal and important. I will begin by talking about the research of Dr. John Gottman and his partner, Nan Silver. Dr. Gottman was and is a family therapist and couples therapist in the Puget Sound and Seattle area. And for decades, he engaged in research to help couples find out how their relationships could survive and what might predict a downward spiral in their relationship. He studied hundreds of couples before he could begin to formulate what made marriages endure. And bear in mind that the phrase, what makes marriages endures, is really symbolic of any and every relationship of any kind of significance. Gottman's research led him to conclude that 4 types of behaviors created a sufficiently high level of discord such that it would end a relationship. These 4 behaviors he learned through research, not guessing or imagination, but through research. These 4 behaviors would predict with an incredibly high rate of accuracy whether or not a couple would divorce. Bear in mind, divorce is just a symbol for any relationship of any kind being disrupted. So listen carefully to this list that I'm about to give you. Take a few notes. These behaviors were criticism of a partner's personality, not what they do, but of their personality. Contempt, which assumed one spoke from a position of superiority over another. Defensiveness and emotional withdrawal. What Dr. Gottman called stonewalling, what I am typically calling cutoffs. As the frequency and intensity of these patterns increases in a relationship, so does the likelihood, as night follows day, that that relationship will dissolve. And Gottman, for whatever reason, was interested in appealing to people who were empirically minded, scientifically minded, hard data minded, and so these were things that he watched carefully. Dr. Gottman also later, by demand of the public, if you will, defined 7 principles that strengthen and nurture a relationship and support the relationship through difficult periods. So listen carefully. These might be helpful. The first is that the partners should understand one another's love maps, what really means that the partners learn to share and learn about one another as thoroughly as possible. That's what that means, to really know one's partner as thoroughly as possible. Nurture fondness and admiration. Nurture fondness and admiration. Turn toward the other instead of away, particularly as things get difficult. Let one's partner influence oneself. Solvable problems. Some problems can't be solved or can't be solved easily, but solvable problems. Find a way to overcome gridlock and create shared meaning. All of those are important. Now, another example that reflects the importance of principles in relationship, because now what is becoming evident is that when a person enters into a relationship, they can't just spontaneously behave all the time any way they want to, that when we come into a relationship, we're actually entering a sphere of life in which we must give ourselves, as it were, to a third thing. And this third thing is principles that guide the relationship. Okay. Another person who reflects this way of thinking and has worked for decades with couples is a guy named Albert Ellis. Many people don't know his name. He was considered one of the most influential psychotherapists of the 20th century, and now his books and so forth are pretty much out of date. But out of his vast clinical experience, he developed principles that he believed fostered and nurtured strong relationships. Now, this is not empirical research per se, but his intuition out of decades of experience of what worked. And in one of his books called Making Intimate Connections, 7 Guidelines for Great Relationships, he gave the following principles. You might want to take note here too. Accept your partner as is. Express appreciation frequently. Communicate from a point of integrity. That is, really express what's on your mind and heart. Share and explore differences with your partner. Don't argue about the differences, but explore them. Support your partner's goals. Give your partner the right to be wrong. Interesting? Reconsider your wants as goals. In other words, make a plan to have your wants long term. Once again, from a different place. Several decades away, we see the importance of giving relationships a clear set of guidelines to maintain and sustain harmony. Note that Ellis gives specific directives that govern behavior of each partner toward the other. Note also that Gottman's research demonstrates that having productive and satisfying relationships necessitates a carefully thought through structure of principles and rules that govern the relationship that both parties accept. How interesting. Please also note that gratitude was an important theme permeating all of these principles and guidelines. Now, let's consider another area of life. I draw from my own experience of working 30 years with congregations. I've worked as a minister, settled minister, interim minister, and a consultant with over 10 congregations. In addition, I am familiar with many other congregations vicariously by hearing about the stories with them. And over the years, I was deeply struck by the striking variations among congregations. People are all the same everywhere. We all share the human condition. We all are alike in so many ways. But I experience the reality that congregations are different. And of course, yours is the best congregation on earth. Out of all of those I've experienced, of course. But there are variations among congregations. It's almost like congregations have personalities. And specifically, I've been deeply impressed among the variations in congregations in terms of their level of civility, their ability to discuss difficult subjects calmly, their capacity to maintain a sense of unity despite all differences, an ability to move peacefully through significant institutional changes, and the ability to move effectively towards accomplishment of important goals. All these are really big deals for health of congregations. Congregations that demonstrate a capacity to calmly manage challenges and transitions are radically different from those whose capacity to do this is impaired. And of course, y'all are best among all congregations I've ever dealt with in that regard. And over the years of experience, I thought, why? Because if I look at the educational level, the economic level, the social level, the types of people, the UU congregations are remarkably similar in terms of the types of people that inhabit the different congregations, and they're all wonderful people. And great people, and care about the earth, and care about justice, and all these wonderful things. And I thought to myself, where does that difference come from? Why? Why is that? Why is that different level of functioning there? And then after many years of looking at this, and now after laboring over this question, I finally come to you and I reach you with the answer that I'm certain about and that I have developed over the last 5 years or so, which is this: the congregations which are able to smoothly move through transitions effectively and that have a calmness about them in even discussing difficult issues have the following characteristics without fail. The presence of a covenant, which is to say an agreement about how people choose to be with one another. Number two, the degree to which a congregation's covenant was widely understood, taken seriously, affirmed by long-term members and church leaders, and imbued the culture of the congregation. And number three, the degree to which the covenant provided clear, vivid, and compelling guidance. All three, because there were a number of churches that had beautiful covenants, they just never looked at them. It never touched the life of people. An example of such a covenant that a congregation would have is the following: I promise to cultivate in myself, not in others, but in myself, appreciation of our commonalities and our differences, the trust that others are operating with good intentions, a willingness to forgive and seek forgiveness, ownership of my actions and their consequences. So that's just an example. Not necessarily better or worse than anyone, but just an example. A carefully crafted covenant, respectfully regarded by a congregation, and especially its leaders, generates levels of mutual respect, good communication, and trust that make a civil and productive relationship in the system possible. This conviction, this observation proved true across differences in theology and belief. It did not matter what the particular tenor or flavor of the theology or political beliefs of a congregation were. What really mattered in terms of them being able to be effective, and this is true for families, is the degree to which they had guiding principles that they took really seriously. When a person enters into a relationship, and I've done a considerable amount of couples therapy over my lifetime, and this is something that I affirm out of that experience too. When a person enters a relationship, whether it's a committed relationship such as a marriage or a congregation, they are entering a realm in which something is being created that is beyond the individual personalities of the people involved. Two or more individuals create a third thing, whether it's a congregation or a marriage or a family or a business partnership. They enter a third thing in which the rules, values, principles, and guidelines which will solidify the relationship are important and vital. And the people in the relationship have to be respectful of these principles, this third thing, these values, these guidelines, for the best possible outcome to occur within the relationship. What is true for a couple, what is true for a family, is true in spades for a larger gathering of people called the congregation. That is why I am thrilled. I am so happy that this congregation has committed to a gathering of people on December the 2nd, a Saturday, in which, by the way, there will be free food and free childcare. Did you hear me say that? Free food, free childcare, in which you may begin to create your own covenant from the people, from the ground up, from the grassroots. You create a covenant as to how you want to be with one another, and you know what? You might find that exercise valuable for your own family and your relationship.